All right.
Here, meet there.
There you
That
go.
made that difference.
Yeah.
A thumbs up. That means we're live. And I want to tell you something. I have been looking forward to this. I'm not just saying it because you're sitting here. I've been looking forward to this session amongst many of the ones that I've done, Will. I've just been looking forward to this because you don't know this. I have admired you a long time.
Yeah.
And I have for various reasons. And here's how we're going to start this conversation to make sure everybody knows. We're talking to Chief Jim Crawford here today. James, Mr. The man, Will, Vinay, and I were talking earlier as far as a lot of stuff that we go around talking about. You started. But there's something more, Chief, about you that you didn't know is I admire your Air Force stuff because I had the honor, privilege of laying on my belly in the tail of a KC-10 one time.
Oh, did you really?
I sure did.
That's all. I got to fly on a KC-10
Yep.
from Virginia to Spain. That was a long flight. In a KC-10.
But tell them what that's about, though. I know the story. They don't. So what's your tie-in with that?
Well, I've always been a volunteer firefighter since I've been 15 years old, but so I always wanted to make it a career. So, and my goal was also to become a Pittsburgh firefighter. So, the only way I could seal the deal on that at a young age is, in my mind, I need to go into the Air Force. Because that, number one, will give me experience, obviously, and it will give me 10 veterans points, which everybody knows is very valuable in a civil service testing process. So, yeah, when I had graduated from high school in 1978, I went into the United States Air Force and did boot camp, and then went to the Air Force Technical Fire Training Center. That was,
Chanute.
at the time was at Chanute.
Yep.
Yeah. And went through the whole program.
My sister, who's a lot smarter than me, had a lot of opportunities, but when she got through at high school, she went in the Air Force and had to follow Big Brother. So she went your pathway and went to Chanute and was a firefighter in the Air Force
really?
for a while.
Wow.
Yeah, absolutely. And that wasn't the tie-in with the fuel tanker, but the tie-in with that was I had the opportunity. We were in, what's the air base in Fort Worth? It was north of Fort Worth, right there where the manufacturer for F-16 was. And now we're getting off subject, but I told you this was going to happen.
Right.
But anyway, they had a tanker there that day, and they said, "Hey, you want to take a look?" And everything. I'm like, "Yeah, sign me up." And so they took us inside the the air tanker and everything, and let us do all the seats, and I was just totally fascinated with it.
Yeah, that's a pretty amazing aircraft.
Yep.
We had KC-135.
It's really
the base I was
right.
at, which is the older
okay
refueler, but
right.
The Air Force takes such good care of those planes. I mean, those planes were 40,
really
50 years old.
The technology was in 1960.
Then they update the technology in the old aircraft. So.
Well, now you talk about that, and I've told you we'd get off subject, but that's okay. Everybody loves us. That same base, they had a bomber, B-52, just a little, and we crawled up inside this thing. Man, it's like going through a rabbit hole. There's there's no space inside it. It's all engines and fuel tank and explosives, the ordnance.
What I used to love about being an Air Force firefighter is when you were assigned to the flight line crash station, you got to sit there out front and watch every aircraft known to man, military aircraft, up and down.
What we were doing out there was right about the time that we were moving from the old fire academy to the new fire academy, and they sent us out there because Simtron had just built a system there at DFW. And so they were showing us the Simtron system and how that worked for aircraft firefighting technique and everything. And they loaded us up and took us over to Fort Worth to the air base and everything, and just show and tell kind of stuff. But it was pretty cool. But I know that I know nothing about it, no claim to, but I know you had a background in that. So that's how you got started.
That's how in my career service. That's how I got started.
And so after service time, you were able to go right back with Pittsburgh.
Well, I did 4 years active duty in the Air Force Fire Protection. Then I got out and did oddball jobs, obviously. And then I got hired on at the Martinsburg, West Virginia Veterans Administration Medical Center Fire Department.
That's just right across the river, though? Or is that, how far is that from Pittsburgh?
It's about 4 hours.
Oh, wow. Okay.
It's down near Hagerstown, Maryland.
Okay. All right.
So worked there for about a year, and then I wanted to get back more into crash stuff, so I laterally transferred to Andrews Air Force Base.
Oh, wow.
Department.
No kidding.
1984.
All right.
When Ronald Reagan was the president. I'm still on my age.
That's okay.
And that was really cool. It's because Air Force 1 and 2 are obviously there.
Right.
And it was the older ones. It was I think there were 707.
Okay, right.
But we got to do walkthroughs of
Wow.
the Air Force 1 and 2.
Sure.
And it's funny because they literally wax those planes.
Do they really?
They're waxed.
The exterior shell of it.
Exterior shell.
Right.
And as firefighters, we had to put little booties on and hairnets to walk through that plane. They're so
No
clean.
kidding.
It's unbelievable.
No kidding. That's fun stuff. Now, but so how did you end up back in Pittsburgh then? Where did just an opportunity open up or whatever?
Pittsburgh was testing.
Okay.
So I wanted to be back in Pittsburgh to be able to test and everything. So I moved back, got a fire safety position, and as I was working on my testing process, went through the testing process, and there was 5,000 people.
Good
taking
Lord, really?
That test at the time. Yeah, so it was
Holy
written
cow.
test, and then they obviously cut a lot of people out and
Yep.
get you down to the physical agility part. So I practiced for months,
Yep.
literally. In my volunteer station, I would set ladders up and I would run up and down them as fast as I could, because that's what, I mean, you're timed when you do these tests, you know.
Yep.
I wanted that job.
Yep.
So,
Good for you.
Yeah, so I placed 5th out of 5,000 people.
No kidding.
Yeah.
That's pretty impressive. And the rest is history.
Yeah.
Because you moved up through the ranks. How long did you work with the city?
20 years. I did 20 years, and I always, in the back of my mind, I've always wanted to be a chief officer, and it didn't matter what type of chief, just a chief officer in a beach community.
No kidding.
Always wanted that. So when I was about a year out from retiring in Pittsburgh, I started looking.
Yeah.
Slowly mentioned it to my wife.
Right.
You know, and so North Myrtle Beach was the first one I seen. I think they were hiring a training chief at the time. This is back in 2009.
Okay. Right.
So, and then Midway's was on there. At first, I wanted to go to Florida, and the wife said, "Absolutely not.
Too far south?
Bugs, heat, the whole."
And it's better here, I guess, right?
Well,
okay.
I told her, okay, let's get a map and we'll pick halfway.
Right.
And South Carolina was halfway. So
well, lucky us.
Yeah.
Because now, ever since then, you have done it was fire rescue stuff. You have done a lot of stuff for us. You have out in the heat. You've been in the heat at this place for a number of years, so you really worked hard for us, and we appreciate it.
It was a big adjustment coming from the north.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a different.
Right.
I mean, the heat, like you just mentioned, the heat,
Right.
just the way of life. It's different.
But you are a pioneer in firefighter rescue. You are the man that we admire and that we look to for that. And I'm just. I'd love for everybody to be able to hear what story you'd like to share with that, as far as kind of your passion, and I somewhat know that, but got you into that.
That didn't just happen.
Nope.
So it was my first. I came on in Pittsburgh in 93, and so I luckily I got to the busiest house, number 8 firehouse, ladder and an engine. Did 5-6 working fires a week between those 2 rigs, and so I was there for almost 2 years, and we went to the Bryson Street fire. So if everybody is familiar with it, we lost 3 firefighters that night. So in a small residential house. So and at the time, Pittsburgh didn't use RIT teams. Not many fire departments actually did. And I didn't know anything about RIT. Right. I'm thinking, you're just going to do what you got to do.
It was a foreign concept.
Sure.
Load the building, load the yard, but that was it. Right.
So a lot of things happened after that fire, and I beat myself after that fire. What can be done to make this better? What can be done to improve outcomes? So I just started researching and calling fire departments across the country, large departments, small departments. What do you do for if one of your firefighters is trapped in a building? That type of thing. And I just notes. And I just slowly started developing procedures, techniques, policies on how to do rapid intervention.
You're not going to hear this, and you're not going to accept it. You changed the fire service. You changed South Carolina's fire service by bringing that technology here and teaching and putting it here.
I always liked to hope.
Yep.
Yep.
You did.
You know,
and again, you're humble, and I appreciate that. But it's just it's the truth.
Yeah. And it's funny. I just got done with speaking.
Yes, please.
A class on firefighter rescue, and just trying to open the eyes of everybody, because I always ask at the beginning of the class, okay, this class is about firefighter rescue. By show of hands, how many departments in here actually respond a RIT team to your structure fires? And there was maybe 50 people in the class, and 10 people raised their hand.
Right.
You know, and it's disheartening.
Right.
You know, and it's like
the hardness of the lesson you had to experience
yes.
and learn.
And that's why it's so disheartening
Sure.
to me, because I know
Yep.
what the feelings you get when you drag a dead firefighter out of a building.
Would you say, and I'm not trying to defend that position at all, because I think that is a fair emotion to have, but the follow-up question would be that I could then raise my hand is I don't know that we respond that separate company, volunteer system, it is what it is. But every time we're together in all the training that we do, we have instituted acronyms and training functions and equipment
Yes.
that
Yes.
you have pioneered the concept for. So I don't know that I have the luxury of being able to, as your definition, the company, but it's instituted every time we go somewhere. And I lay that at your doorstep. I know that many people contribute to concept, but I lay that at your doorstep.
Okay. Well, and again, I come from a large department that put 30 plus firefighters on first alarm.
Sure.
You know? So there's not many needs that weren't
Sure.
taken care of. So when I came here, obviously it's different. Midway, we run 19 a shift.
Mm-hmm.
And you figure everybody's responding to the structure fire. So I wanted our people, because I've trained them, to be our RIT. So our third due engine is our RIT company. But that's a big problem when you have only 19 firefighters. So you're taking 3 people right out of the
Equation
game.
of help. Right, sure.
Yeah, so I've learned that I can use those folks now, because what we did with we actually have an auto aid program now with Georgetown City Fire. So any structure fire we get,
Reassigned packages
we're
coming.
sending a rig. Any structure fire they get, we're sending a rig. So now I have the ability to use my third due if I have to in suppression, because I know city fire's coming with a rig.
If you get a chance to take his class, stop whatever you're doing and do that, no matter where you are. So we're not going to reteach that class, but you had 10 out of the 50 raise their hands. Where do you start, though, when you tell these folks, when you tell people in your class, how do we get in the game? What's the first step? What's the first thing that people do to get that mindset and to institutionalize that? What do you tell them?
The first step is realizing and accepting that, number one, we have to do that, because and I always say this is a phrase that you always hear me say, is no one is coming in for us but us. And when you say that to people and you think, hey, at 3 in the morning, you get a mayday comes over the air and you have 2 firefighters that are lost and disoriented in this building, you can't look across the street and say, okay, you 2 police officers, mayor and counselor, gear up, go in and get them. Don't work that way.
Doesn't happen.
So I always say also is what you see is what you get. So your folks, your troops on the fire ground are the only ones that are going to be able to deal with that situation. So if they're not trained up, if they don't believe in what they're doing with rescuing our own, you're not going to succeed. It's you're going to fail.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's the first step, is everybody agreeing this is what we need to do something. And the next step obviously would be we have to create some type of a firefighter rescue training program,
Right.
that can train our people up to the level where we need to be.
Because that was going to be my next lead-in question. Many of the members of our association, many of the people watching, come from realities that 19 even sounds golden to them. So what's your advice? And you touched on that a little bit, but what is your advice to those people who say, I understand the need, what's my next step? How do I make that a reality with me?
And that is a problem, because if you only have 5 people showing up to a structure fire, what do? And that you have to rely on mutual aid. You have to believe in the system. If you're familiar with the 1710, 1720
Yes,
standards, read up on them, because there's avenues outs basically that 5 people. Obviously, if you get on scene, you have 5 people and there's a reported entrapment, you don't have to do 2 in, 2 out.
Mm-hmm.
You obviously can
Yep.
deploy.
Yep.
But we still have to be trained up. We have to know what we're doing.
I see, and I know you are exposed to at the national level 10 times more than I ever will be. I see around here, though, an interesting, and I will characterize it as disturbing, trend of aggressive suppression, initial suppression techniques that worries me a little bit if it's not married with what you try to teach. How do you balance, and you know what I'm talking about. I mean, it's that moment on the scene, you got to be interior, you got to be aggressive, you got to get it, and I'm not excluding what an initial company officer decision making and that tactical choice is, but how do you balance that with what you have spent a career trying to tell people and teach people to do?
Well, that's where we need to make sure that when we size these buildings up, you have to factor in your manpower, because we all know that you need X amount of people to do these 4 tasks. So if you don't have the manpower to do that, and there's no life involved, you're going to have to make hard decisions, and you're going to have to decide whether,
right,
okay, are we going to engage this building aggressively, like you had just mentioned, and send our risk up, or are we going to take a step back, reevaluate everything, see what happens, and then figure out where we're going to go from there.
I addressed recently a group of future up-and-coming officers, and I made the statement that no building, to me, was worth your life. And that was very disturbing, because they had spent a period of time of doing some aggressive skill-building techniques.
All right.
And when I made that, I think it challenged them counterintuitively of what they had been doing. And what I meant by that, you just reinforced, is I want to see us build initial decision makers, rank aside, whatever that means, initial decision makers that can evaluate what they're seeing, what's happening in front of them, and make safe, good decisions. Now, that doesn't mean that I'm never willing to risk what my reward potentially may be inside that structure, but part of what I have admired watching you do and listening is that I think that balances that out.
Yes.
I think that balances it out. What you're saying provides another tool in the toolbox for somebody to be able to balance that out.
Right. It's funny you had mentioned about there's no building worth a firefighter's life. I have a whole program on Bryson Street that I do. I got a lot of pictures, and the very last picture I show is the vacant lot.
Bingo. That's I told y'all that's why I was excited, because I've used that example. And back home, I mean, even this past fall, I think it was, we had a 100-year-old legacy home, Knotty Pine stuff around south. You know what I'm talking about. Middle of the day, nobody there. There's half the house was storage. And I had people, great guys, trained, well-equipped people that wanted to invest a lot of time in a structure that by the time we got there wasn't any salvageable content to this thing, and the owner provided that nobody was there. So I got 100-plus-year-old chimneys, I got roof falling in, I got an unreliable water supply. I'm not going to do it. And people got mad at me, and I use that as an example because it's not far from my house. And less than a month later, you know what was left of that house? Dirt, because they came in there with a loader, loaded it up, and hauled what the heck was left off, and nobody cares.
And it's hard telling your young, aggressive firefighters that want to get in there and get it. I was there before, but that you talked about decision making, and that is so important because with decision making, what's tied in with that is experience.
Absolutely.
So in your case, you knew a lot about that situation, and you were able to make the correct decision.
How many people, I wonder, in your class this morning, additionally, and so many things you can measure, how many of those people were seasoned veterans versus people that were just getting into this that have a different perspective about it? I worry that, and we're going down a real hole here, but we struggle. Midway's probably this way. We struggle today getting and keeping people. They're jumping around different places. They're going outside of profession and getting other jobs. We compete against a lot of different things. I was sitting there with the chief just a few minutes ago, and we were talking about the fact that he was in a department for 43 years.
Yeah.
And yet now he's got people that are 6 months in that they're having to put into management leadership roles because that's what they've got.
Right. Well, that's the new age fire service that's happening now, and nobody wants to do this job anymore. When I tested for Pittsburgh, that was
5,000. That shocked me. 5,000 people,
and half of those people would have cut their right arm off for that job. I was one of them.
Right.
Hey, I'll fight fire with one arm. I'll do it. But you don't see that passion or that want much anymore.
Your skill set is incredible. How do you institutionalize, or how have you institutionalized that at Midway and or the surrounding departments? God, if I had your skill set, I don't understand how I could keep from every day talking about this thing. So how do you institutionalize that, or what practices do you put in at Midway that kind of makes your passion of firefighter rescue a reality?
Well, first off, when I first got to Midway 14 years ago, I really beat the RIT training pretty good. So the guys are to the point now, they do it on their own now. I don't have to say nothing. New hires come in, they're out teaching them all the RIT stuff, and they're very good at it. So it's nice to be able to sit back and be comfortable with, because I'm not a micromanager. I have my projects and tasks that I have to do. I'm surely not going to go out and tell a captain or a lieutenant, hey, you need to do this. I just don't believe in that. But it's hard, and especially with the mindset that when I first came to South Carolina, RIT wasn't a thing.
No,
at all.
Right. I mean it sincerely that you changed the environment around here. I know you don't buy it, but that's okay. It's true. We didn't have that culture.
But it's just a matter of, I think training is the big thing. Once you train people up and get them to believe in something, in this case, rescuing our own, and they're comfortable in the techniques and stuff, I think that they just run with it.
What have you seen since you have been doing this, and since you travel all over the place teaching and talking about this? What do you what's been the biggest change about this? The acceptance of it, the institutionalizing of it, or what's been the biggest thing that I guess you could be proud of?
As far as RIT's concerned?
Yeah, firefighter rescue in general.
Yeah. What I'm seeing is a trend, whether it's true or not. I'm just, what I'm visualizing is that I think that just like hazmat. I remember hazmat was such a big thing. Everybody was doing it.
Absolutely.
Well, with RIT, it was saturated. Everybody was doing it. Now I'm thinking everybody's kind of starting to drop off now a little bit.
Oh, wow. That was going to be one of my questions. What do you see in the future? So good.
And it's concerning.
Yep. Is that because of lack of number of fire calls you're seeing? Or
well, I think it's because what you mentioned earlier about nobody wanting to do this job and like Midway, okay. we got 6 vacancies.
Okay.
You know, and it's people don't want to do this work anymore. It's
so you're getting somebody in the door, and part of the problem is when they come in the door, you got to teach them basic skills.
Yes.
And you've got to turn over a apparatus operators, whatever the case may be. Is this taking a back seat then, what you're saying, maybe, just because we got to do those fundamentals first?
Well, yeah, because priorities, obviously, with a new hire is going to be turnout gear,
yep.
SCBA,
yep. Right.
You know,
right.
all that type of stuff before they even
sure.
considered, okay, we're going to teach you how to rescue a firefighter.
If I kept somebody 5 to 7 years, I thought I'd accomplished something. And the question I've got is, in 5 or 7 years, can I put in your brain those practices and principles enough to where it just becomes natural and second nature, and you, whether or not you're at a leadership position, that you're institutionalized and it's just come common nature? And maybe that's part of this problem. Is it just, hey, everybody's so new, it's so fresh that they really don't have an opportunity to. I'm focusing on ground ladders or PPE just because that's what I'm more comfortable with. And is this something that, how do we make it more part of what's just the basic stuff we have to do?
Well, we get into that, what I mentioned earlier. It's a belief system. You have to believe that rescuing one of our firefighters,
yep.
my friend,
yep.
people I work with,
yep.
is important.
Yep. God forbid we got to learn a lesson like you had to go through to make that part of what we are. That's. What do you think then is the future? What's the answer? Is it going to be? Is it bright? Is there some technology that's out here on this floor that's going to save the day, or is it just simply we got to get our gloves dirty?
What I'm thinking is, since manpower is an issue, and that to put 3 or 4 dedicated personnel standing by out of the system, basically, I'm thinking that everybody needs to be trained up. Everybody needs to be as good as those 4 RIT members right there. Everybody needs to be able to perform RIT work, so that when we're all on the fire ground, if I've got 20 people on the fire ground, all 20 are RIT members.
Mm-hmm. Oh,
so
wow.
that
okay.
If someone goes down on the 2nd floor, there's going to be crews.
It's not like I've just got
a
designated 3-man team over here. We've got a 20-man team that's on scene.
Right, but the thing you have to, as an incident commander, yep. you have to remember when you engage suppression people into firefighter rescue, you're taking away from suppression.
Right. Okay.
So you got to keep those things in mind.
What part of this would you say to the listener? How do you motivate? How do you get that listener to get on board with this? What advice would you give those people that are going to be watching this tape that would say, firefighter rescue, this is your priority, this is your next step? What advice would you give the world?
Same thing I told my class. I told everybody, pull out a notepad and take these notes. You need to Google, or whatever search engine you use, Google Mayday audios and listen. Really listen to the audios of the Maydays being given.
Wow. What
they're saying. There's some Mayday audios out there that send chills up your spine.
Sure.
There's some that the firefighter is so distressed, he's asking over the air, tell my wife and children I love them. You know, so it's stuff like that. And there's reports, all the firefighter fatality reports. Everybody should be reviewing those. Mm-hmm. Google them, look at them. There's pictures. And when you start studying some of this stuff and some of the mistakes that occurred and listening to the audios, it'll make you a believer.
What's Chief Crawford's future? Where do you see yourself in? You can't disappear. You're still too valuable. So what's the future? What do you see yourself doing?
Well, I've got 49 years in the fire service. I want to be able to say I have 50 years. So next July,
Yeah.
my 50 years. So
You realize that a bunch of folks just wrote that date down because they're going to be calling you and saying, "Hey, man, if you want to come to live in whatever."
yeah, right. So I don't know. I think it's time. I'll be hanging out in my Camaro. I got my classic Camaro, car shows, boating. I've got a boat, grandkids,
Yeah.
and I'll teach. I'll stay on the teaching circuit. You know, I just think that every day going in, and I love going to work. I love
Right.
Midway. There's
Right.
great people there. I don't know. We'll see. Come next July, I'll be saying, nah, I'm gonna stay another year.
That's the way to work. Well, I'm thinking what we may want to go in and do, Will, is get like a 5-year commitment or contract or something now, and we're just going to plan ahead that we can kind of lock him in ahead of time. How about that? Chief, you are a prize that this state has, and
I appreciate that.
Midway is incredibly lucky to have you. South Carolina is too. You've helped us out a lot, and I don't get an opportunity to say that to you a lot, but you have helped us out a heck of a lot. And Will's bearing me out over there because he's shaking his head.
I just want to help.
You have helped the fire service, and you've brought something to the fire service that we all just wake our butts up and start doing better about. So
Just want to make a difference.
you got to keep plugging.
Yeah, and like Paul Combs said the other day, bricks.
Great tie-in. That's perfect. Yes, sir. That is exactly right.
You lay your bricks up. Don't just have one. Once you set one on there, go look for another one.
Good for you. That's a great tie-in. That's exactly the case. My friend, thank you. I
Yes, sir.
appreciate all you have done for us, and thank you for being here with us again today.